So now we'd like to get started. And when we think about virtual learning, we often think about evaluating. Virtual learning is different than evaluating regular learning, and not really. It's all the same process. So now we can get started. Come on, Patty, you want to get started with our presentation?
Yes.
I think so. So everyone should be able to see the slides. Can you? Give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides. I'm going to take that as all thumbs are up, right? So I see thumbs up there with Andy.
Well, I don't know how to do the thumbs up, but I can see the presentation.
All right, there you go. That works just as well. So, all right, let's get started. So,
all right.
As I say,
Ms. Kamal, you want to start first?
Okay. All right then. Thank you much for joining us. We are so proud, so delighted to have you, to have Jack and Patti Phillips from the ROI Institute in the United States for this webinar tonight. We'll have it around like 1 hour or with the question and answers. I would like to introduce first Dr. Patti Phillips. She's the CEO of the ROI Institute. As a renowned leader in measurement and evaluation, Patti helps organizations implement the ROI methodology in more than 70 countries around the world. Her work as an educator, researcher, consultant, and coach supports participants as they develop their expertise to help organizations and communities thrive. And of course, we have Jack Phillips, Dr. Jack Phillips. He's also a world-renowned expert on accountability, measurement, and evaluation. He's the chairman of ROI Institute. Dr. Phillips provides consulting services for Fortune 500 companies and major global organizations. The author or editor of more than 100 books. He conducted workshops and presents conferences throughout the world. ROI Institute was the winner of the measurement, testing, and assessment category of the 2019 Training Magazine Network Choice Award Program. So thank you again, Dr. Patti, Dr. Jack, for joining us tonight. We are so happy to have you with us in this webinar. I think Jack will start first, or Patti, it's all yours. The platform is for you.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Kamal. So, Jack, you want to kick it off?
I will. Let me go with the objectives. You have in front of you what we want to cover tonight. So we'll think about walking away knowing the 5 levels of outcome from any virtual program. It's the same levels that you would do for the instructor-led, as you have reaction, learning, application, impact, and ROI. So we'll make sure we understand that clearly. And then we think about virtual learning. Sometimes it fails. Many times it fails to deliver, particularly at level 3, application at level 4. So let's look at fails and what we can do to make that work. And then explain why we need to think about impact particularly. Way to impact in our evaluation these days, because we have funders who give us money, who give us budgets, and they want to see that kind of results from our programs, whether they're virtual or live or not. And then finally, how do we step by step do this? And we'll show you a methodology and show how we design virtual learning to deliver results. But results now will be at the level 3, application level 4, impact, and maybe even ROI level 5. So that's what we want to do.
Perfect.
Patti, I think you got some polls for us now.
Perfect. So we want to start with a few polling questions. And as I get the polling up, you'll take a look at these 5 items. These are some serious performance challenges that we've identified over recent years. So just take a quick read of those. I'm going to pop the poll up and we're going to see what you think, true or false, when it comes to these challenges. So what do you think? So I am now launching the poll.
So remember, this is how you
Okay.
perceive it and based on the work that you're doing and have done in learning and development. Are these true or false from your perspective?
Right. So, for example, the first one is most learning development is wasted or not used. Do you perceive that as being true or false? The second one, learning outcome desired by executives and client organizations is rarely measured. Is that true or false? Number three, most learning providers do not have data showing that they make a difference in the organization. Do you view that as true or false? Number four, most executives see learning as a cost and not an investment. Do you see that as true or false? And then the last one, most executives view hard skills as being more valuable than soft skills. How do you view that? So we'll give you just one more minute to answer these questions, and we'll share the results of our poll.
You want us to be
So
honest, right?
interesting. Excuse me?
You want us to be honest with the answers.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Let's
sure.
look at
Yes,
the
be
way
honest.
things
Yes.
are. And I know what you're saying because some of these we want to say false, but we have to say true based on what we experience. So put what you really see happening now. What's your perception, your honest feedback here?
Yes, what do you really believe to be true? And I will share the results here in just a moment. I'll say I will share the poll in just one moment. Here we go. Okay, I think everyone is in. Okay, here we go. So we have about 65 people have voted. I mean, 65% of the people, population has voted. So let's just see what we did with 65. I was hoping for 70%, but here are the end results. So interesting. Okay, does everyone see the results?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So we're getting some truths here, Jack.
Yes.
Some truths with regard to these serious challenges.
Yeah. On the first one there, I know we wanted to say false, but it is true. We still have difficulty getting people to use what they've learned and have an impact. That's going to even be more pronounced with virtual learning. So we'll be working right on that. And yes, executives want to see the business connection. When they give us money, they want to see how we connect to the organization. And that's often a business measure. And that's what they want to see, but we're not really providing that. Only 8% says we are actually doing that now. Then, number three, do we make a difference? Most learning providers do not have data show we make a difference. Patty, I don't see the percentage. Tell me the percentage there. It's not showing up with mine.
92% say this is true. Only
Yeah.
8% say it's false.
See,
So I think everyone's in agreement.
to make a difference with someone, they have to be using what they're learning and they have a corresponding impact. That's when we made a difference. You can see most of us don't have that data. So that's a challenge for us. It's even more of a challenge with virtual. That's our point. And number four, Patty, is it a cost or investment?
People perceive it as, or agree that executives perceive learning as a cost. 77% say this is true.
You see, here's the problem. If they see it as a cost, it's easy to reduce it, eliminate it, freeze it, pause it, those bad things that we hear. So what we want to do is to be able to convince executives that what we're doing is an investment. The best way to do that is actually the ROI that we'll be talking about. So we've got to have more of that going on here so that executives don't see us as a cost. And then finally, what's the verdict on this one?
The last one, most executives view hard skills as more valuable than soft skills. 85% of our respondents agree. This is true. We only have 15% who say, no, that's false.
So there's a challenge for us because we know, and executives really know as well, that it's the soft skills that often drive the best organizations, the most admired organizations, the most creative, profitable organization, the most sustainable organizations, and the best places to work. That really comes from soft skills. But executives don't necessarily see the value of soft skills. And if we have virtual learning with soft skills is the challenge. We've got to make sure it works. We've got to make sure that executives see that soft skills can deliver the value, even in a virtual format. So that's our challenge here. So these current situation gives us some challenges. So now let's think about what we've experienced lately is a lot of classic learning programs of instructor-led are now being converted to virtual. So is it working? Let's think about that for a minute. Can virtual learning Yes, go ahead.
No, sorry, Jack.
Right.
So we just have another poll for you. Can virtual learning really be as effective as face-to-face? Sorry about that, Jack. So I'm going to launch another poll for you and let's see what you think about those.
What do you think?
So yes, no, or maybe. Yes, no, or maybe. Ooh. Several people came in immediately saying yes, of course. We've got some no's, a few maybes. All right, we have about 72% are in. So if anyone else has you say maybe in the chat box. So maybe. Okay, I think we'll call it quits. Let me share the results with you there. So about 42% say yes, it can be. There are some who say no. They're the diehard in-person, face-to-face. We lean toward that as well. Others say, 32% say yes, maybe virtual can be as effective as face-to-face.
Yes.
So, and that's what we see too. You know, maybe it can be. Everything, all answers to all questions is it depends, right? So maybe it can be. Jack, were you going to comment on these results?
Well, yes, it's obviously it can be, but so much of it doesn't. So we'll look at what can we do to make sure that the virtual learning that we have now, that's replaced so much instructor-led learning just now, make sure that that's working. That's really provides application and impact. See, that's when we know it's working. So we'll show you what we need to do to get there. But next, let's think about. Yes, go ahead.
No, we're just tracking the same, Jack, as normal. Yeah. So we're both trying to get you to do the same thing, right? We want to hear from you in terms of virtual learning. Why does it fail? So those virtual learning opportunities that you've experienced that did not work, why did they fail? So in your chat box, if you would just quickly share with us your thoughts in terms of the reasons why virtual learning fails. If everybody just jump in your chat box and share. Oh, no, that's good. So it's not based on actual needs. It's a good point. Not interactive. Okay, we need that interactive, that experience. People learn from each other as much as they do from the facilitator and the content. Another interaction. Not action oriented. Distractions, lots of distractions. So we have a couple of interactions, some distractions, interaction again. No action plans, not connected to promotion or incentive. Nobody takes it seriously. I like that one a lot. Yeah, it's more of an activity, right, than a process or a solution to a problem. And because it can't be measured. Again, another one, not taking it seriously. So, Jack, a lot of the same reasons that we've seen why learning fails. So why don't you share with them some of the things that we've seen?
Yes, let's look at that. I want to show you how it's making the newspapers these days. This is the Saturday Journal. There's a front page story here. It says, America's grand experiment in remote learning fails. And it's talking in the school system as the school children come home and now they're on online learning. And it just didn't work here in this country. We were not prepared for it. The students were not prepared, the parents were not prepared, and the teachers were not prepared. So it didn't work. So let's just look at what we've seen. We've had the challenge and a few times to compare instructor-led with actual live programs and look at the difference in the two. And so here's why it breaks down sometimes. We know multitasking is a big issue. That is, people get distracted, they're looking at their iPhones or doing something. And we see it in instructor-led, but not as much as the virtual. The virtual people are habitually multitasking. And we know multitasking doesn't work. You will not have the learning there when you multitask. If you don't have the learning, you won't have the application. If you don't have application, you won't have the impact. And then the manager's support is missing. You see, when someone goes to a instructor-led program, they leave work, they're away from their job, they go to this training, and the manager knows that. The manager has probably approved that. The manager is involved in some way. There may be an expectation created by the manager. But when a virtual program is offered, sometimes the manager doesn't even know this person is taking the program. So we miss the manager support. And as we all know, the manager support is the best influence that we have for level 3 application and level 4 impact. That is, if the manager's involved, we're more likely to get someone to do what they have learned and to have that impact that we need. So we miss that so much in virtual, but we don't have to. We can bring it in. These are challenges for us. And then the success is based on learning. See, ISD team, the instructional system designers, have mistakenly are thinking through the success of learning occurs when there's learning and that's it. The work is done. No. The work is not done until they use the learning and there's an impact in their work. And so we design for learning only and we think our work is over. No. Our funders say, hey, if they don't use what they've learned, then we've wasted time and effort and money. So we've got to think about designing for impact. That's what we need to do. And that's what we're going to show you, designing for the impact that we want. So all through the process, we're all working on getting to the impact. And the facilitator is missing, obviously. That is the live facilitator. And we all know great facilitators like Patti. She's the #1 in our 100 facilitators in our network. She's a great facilitator. She gets you to do that. She creates expectations. She looks at you eye to eye and say, okay, you're going to do this. And here's what's going to happen here if you don't do it. And so that facilitator be so persuasive and so motivational is missing. So the designers have to create that interest, that desire to use it. So it breaks down so many times. It doesn't have to. So how can we get around it? We're going to show you that in a few minutes. So let's go to the next slide. We know that the people who fund us want this. If you ask executives what they want from the learning and development, and we have many times, they want to see the impact. So the people who fund our programs, the people allocate our budgets, want learning to connect to impact. That's what they want to see. And some executives want to see ROI. That reference you see there in the bottom one on this chart, it's in that book, Measuring for Success. It says what CEOs really think about learning investments. This is where we presented a lot of data to the profession about what executives want. This is based on interviewing and surveying executives from very top large organizations. And their #1 measure they want to see from learning 96% of them said impact on the business, connecting to the business alignment, business contribution. That's what they want. Whether you're government or nonprofit or a business, it doesn't matter. We all have business measures. A nonprofit has a business measure, just like the program for an alternative to prison has an impact. We reduce time of people being in prison, which is very expensive. We reduce the cost. We save money. So we got to have those impact measures. And the number 2 measure that executives want to see is ROI. 74% of these executives said that. Now, we're not there yet. You can see just from our polling here, we got to push that up. We got to work on this. Just remember, the person who gives you the funding really wants to see impact from what we have, for most of it at least. So that's the challenge for us. So let's look at the next slide. Patti, I think you're going to discuss this.
Right. So for many of you, this is a refresher of the different ways that we can look at the value of the programs we put into place. We start with framework. So any measurement or analytic strategy includes a framework of data. It's the way in which we categorize like measures. And of course, this one is the classic and the one that has worked for so many years, developed originally by an IO psychologist, Raymond Katzel, who gave us the 4 steps to training evaluation. And then Jack built that framework to include cost-benefit analysis, which gets us to the ROI, and then operationalized it through the model and the standards that have become common practice in organizations worldwide. All of these data have value. They inform decision makers of some perspective of learning. For example, level 0 data, inputs and indicators. These data do not inform decision makers as to the results of the learning development, but it does inform decision makers as to the investment being made. So these are the number of people being trained, the number of training going on, the percentage of payroll spent on training. These level 0 data represent the activity or the cost of learning and development. Another way to position them is to say it represents the investment we're making in learning and development. So again, not results, but an important part of the story because it represents what we are investing in. And then of course the results begin to roll out as people get involved in our programs and projects. From a reaction standpoint, yes?
Yeah, I just want to add this. See, sometimes when we see virtual, say, hey, the people logged in and they stayed for the whole session. That's great. That's success. But really, that's level 0. We just know they logged in. That's like a person in the class is there. Obviously, it doesn't speak to any of the outcomes. We cannot record that as success. It's the beginning of success. Success comes later. It's a necessary part of it. Getting them there, getting them logged in, getting them involved. So now continue there. I just wanted to add that.
And what we're really looking for from that participant perspective in terms of results is the participant's view that the content is relevant to them, that they're committed to doing something with it. At level 1, we're looking at what we call buy-in measures. They're bought into the content of the program. It's relevant to them. It's important to their job. They would recommend it to others in similar positions as theirs. They are committed to taking action toward change. And the content represents new information. So these measures have been shown to be predictive of use. And that's what we're really aiming for when we look at reaction data. Yes, we need to know what they think about the platform. We need to know that the platform works. Those are important. But it's really that perception that the content is relevant to the participants back on the job that tells us there's a likelihood they will use it. Learning data. Learning data are important. People need to know what they need to know to do what we want them to do. Where level 1 tells us people are willing to do it, level 2 data tells us people are able to it. Unfortunately, most virtual learning focus focuses more on learning than anything else. We can build tests, we can build exercises, we can say, yes, they got it. But again, it's only part of the story. It tells us people are able to do it. And as we all know, where the rubber meets the road is in what people do with what they know. It's not about what people know. It's good that people know it, and they need to know it, but what we're looking for is application, people doing what we want them to do. And often with virtual learning, we don't follow up to see if in fact behaviors are changing, processes are being followed, procedures are being followed, policies are being put into action. We don't follow up. And this is what has to happen to ensure that we get the impact and the ROI. If people don't apply knowledge, skill, and information, we're not going to see improvement in the business measures. And if we don't see improvement in business measures, we don't get a positive ROI. So application has to happen. So here we look at metrics around use of knowledge, skill, and information, the percentage of content used, frequency of use. We also capture data around barriers and enablers to success, because while it's up to the participants to use what they learn, it is up to the system in which those participants are working to support the use of knowledge, skill, and information. And part of that system is that supervisor. So we often find supervisors are the number one barriers to application. So Jack, you're going to pop in?
Yes, just you notice in that very first polling question, so many of you said that learning is wasted, it's not used. And this is the problem. They learned it maybe, but they just didn't use it. So there are barriers out there. And again, the number one barrier can be the manager if they don't support it. The number one enabler can be the manager if they support it. So the manager can be the good guy or the bad guy. It's just depending on where they support it. Without their support, you're unlikely to get a person to use it. So this is what's missing so much in the virtual, is that we call that manager who's so critical. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. We've got to get them involved in this process. But that's not all.
And while application is important, ultimately the question asked is, so what? People are applying knowledge, skill, and information, but so what? How much improvement are we seeing in measures of output, quality, cost, time, customer satisfaction, job satisfaction, work habits, and innovation? And how much of that improvement is due to our program and not something else? This is critical, and as Jack mentioned earlier, this is the number one measure. Senior executives want to see that connection between the learning and the measures that matter to the organization. And to get to ROI, which tells us the ultimate success of the program, we convert these business impact measures to money, bring in the cost, and then calculate the ROI. And in one metric, we can say how well we did with the funds we were given to invest in our people. So when we talk about ROI, we tend to talk about it in context of two metrics. There are many measures of economic value add. For example, there's ROE, which is return on equity. Return on equity is not an appropriate measure for determining the value of virtual learning. It compares net income to shareholder value. It's a macro level measure. There are other macro level measures that are important to the organization, but the two measures that work across any type program, project, or initiative are the benefit cost ratio and the ROI percentage. We like to show these two together for two reasons. One, benefit cost ratio is the output of cost benefit analysis. It's grounded in welfare economics, public finance. It is a government metric. ROI comes from business and finance. It demonstrates earnings compared to investment, or in our vernacular, net program benefits to program cost. The output of these two metrics is similar, yet different. And there's sometimes some confusion, so that's the second reason we want to show both. So the benefit cost ratio, all we're going to do, and those of you who have been on my webinars before know you're about to do a math problem, so go ahead and grab the calculator, okay? It happens every time. The benefit cost ratio compares the gross benefits of your program to the cost. And when we're talking about benefits here, we're talking about the impact measures converted to money. So when we convert those impact measures to money, when we convert those level 4 measures to money, we're going to convert them to either profit, cost savings, or cost avoidance. Our programs ultimately lead to helping an organization make money, save money, or avoid cost, or do some greater good while it makes money, saves money, and avoids cost. So your numerator is made up of either profit, cost savings, or cost avoidance, and then your program costs represent the fully loaded cost of your program. That includes your needs assessment, design, development, implementation, and the evaluation cost. ROI represents the net program benefits. To get to net program benefits, we simply take program benefits minus the program cost. So that gets you the net, and then we compare that to program cost, and we multiply it times 100. ROI is typically reported as a percentage. So your one math problem for today, all you have to do is tell us in the chat box, if we have benefits of a program of $750,000, cost of a program of $425, what is the BCR, and then what is the ROI, real quick. BCR and ROI, don't be bashful. As Jack will tell you, for some of us, it's 4th grade math. For others of us, we got it earlier. So what do we think? Your only math problem. This is an ROI webinar, therefore there is an ROI calculation. Okay, I can see, Jack, I can see the calculator smoking. I can see it happening.
Is the answer is right?
Well, they're coming in.
They're coming in.
Okay, we've got one answer. We have one answer. Okay, just remember you've got your BCR, which is reported as the ratio, and then your ROI, which will be reported as a percentage, and it is the net. All right, I'm seeing some numbers come in. We've got some BCRs of 1.76. Now, what would be our ROI? If your BCR is 1.76, what is your ROI? Okay, team out there, we know many of you, and you should have this down. Nice job, Soleil. All right, we got it. So, very good.
Okay.
Okay, nice job. All right, so the BCR tells us for every $1 we invest, we get $1.76 back in gross benefits. ROI is telling us for every $1 we invest, we get the dollar back plus an additional 76 cents. Again, the ultimate measure of success, because it's through these metrics we can compare the benefits of our programs to the cost of our programs. Now, to get there, we're going to follow a step-by-step model. Jack?
Yes, and this is a model with, but let's walk through the process and show you step by step how do you do it. Now, just for your information, we'll be giving you a step-by-step guide that explains each of these steps as we go through the. Have this, that something we'll send to you, e-copy, and we're also planning to give you a free book that describes this whole process and some case studies of actual virtual learning, 6 case studies of virtual learning showing the ROI. Now, the first step is to start with why. This breaks down with virtual learning so much. Why are we doing this? That's a business measure. Start with why. You see, if you want to end up with a business measure, you start with it. As Stephen Covey taught us so many years ago, start with the end in mind. The end we need is impact, not learning. It's not just learning. It's not just using the learning. It's the impact. So we start with that, connect it to the business. So when we have the beginning of a new program, we have to have some discussion. We have to have that connection. We have to have some alignment to the business, and then make it feasible. Make sure that we have the right solution. Make sure that learning is the right solution, and virtual learning is the right way to present that. So if we're not having the right solution, we're not going to drive the business measure. That's critical. We all know that sometimes we've implemented learning programs when we knew that that wasn't what we need to do. That won't solve the problem that someone is suggesting. It won't connect to the business. That's what we're saying. And then we expect success. We're going to give you more detail in a few minutes on those first three particularly. Expect success means that we set objectives. So we're actually doing three things here. We're defining success for our program is now at the impact level. And we're not successful until we get there. That's our definition of success. Then we have objectives, and we'll talk about that and show you how to construct them in a few minutes. Objectives for reaction, for learning, for application, and impact. That drives the data we need. So the third thing we do is to make sure all of the stakeholders have those objectives so they can design for the level 3 and level 4, designing for it. That's important. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Then it's a matter of the rest of the process, making it matter to the people who are involved in the program. That's that reaction that Patti talked about. But reaction is influenced by learning. What they learn is forming an opinion about that content. Is it relevant? Is it useful? Is it something I will actually use? So level 1 for learning, for reaction, level 2 for learning. Then we have to make it stick. See, our big problem we've already talked about is making sure they use it properly, make it stick. So we have to make sure that we've designed it for application and for impact. Here's where designers and developers in the virtual format can really make a difference here. Putting tools in place, action plans, job aids, even using technology to help us apply what we're learning and make sure that we have the impact. It's got to be there. And then when we do that, we go through a series of steps we call make credible. So when you get to impact, you really attract some attention now. The executives look at impact. That's the data they want. That's the data they believe in. That's the data they want to see. So now we have to make sure that we sort out the effects of learning from other influences. That is, we take a step always in this process to sort out how much of the impact is actually connected to our learning program, our virtual learning program. We have to do that to be credible. Without it, we're not. You see, we know there are other influences there. We have to do that. That's our first credibility step. Then we convert it to money, get it to money. You see, even if you're in government, you have money, and that's cost. See, the program for alternative to prison, we're saving the cost of incarceration, cost of a day in prison. That's expensive. That's money. So that's money benefits. So we're getting it to money there, make it credible, getting it to actually money in our whatever denominations we use and in our different currencies. And then we make it credible. By making it credible with cost, we want to make sure that we've got the cost all tabulated, all of the cost, not just the cost of the developing the e-learning and during the e-learning program, but it's the cost of the time away from work. You see, we want people to take this away from work so they're not distracted. We want them to come out of your work and do the e-learning. If we don't, we've got that multitasking that's going to go on and they won't learn. So with that time away from work is an expense to us because we didn't get the work done. That's got to be in there. But all of the cost and all of the monetary benefits together comes to ROI, as Patti has just described. Make it credible. We make it credible because we're using a standard calculation right out of the finance and accounting book. That ROI formula comes from finance and accounting. That's the way they describe ROI. We're connecting to something the finance and accounting team can relate to and understand and appreciate. But we know there's some measures that won't be converted to money. Now, that is, it takes too long to do it, or maybe it's not credible. Things like teamwork and collaboration, maybe cooperation, maybe customer satisfaction. Those things that are important to us, but maybe difficult to convert to money. They're still important. We got to connect them to the program. That's what makes it credible, identifying those measures and making that connection. Now we got a story to tell. We got a story to tell with numbers now. We got data for level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But we've also got stories as people reacted to this, as they've learned, and as they used what they've learned. They tell us stories as we collect data in the questionnaire. They tell a story in interviews and follow-ups. We get those good stories and they bring it to life, narrative and numbers. So that's what we do in communicating the data. And finally, if you look at the last part, now we make a better case for funding us. See, if we delivered a positive ROI, we've got data that says this is an investment, and we just showed you a positive return on investment. It removes history. Is it cost or is it investment? They see it as an investment because we've just delivered a return on the investment. Now, if it's negative, we know what we have to do to change it. This is why we use the term black box thinking there. We use black box thinking because we want to make it better. It's like the aviation industry. When a plane crashes, they have black boxes, a voice data recorder and a systems recorder. We take those black boxes and we find out what happened, what caused it, and we correct it with design, procedure, training, anything we can do to make sure that doesn't happen again. We use the same here. We want to always make our programs better. What we're doing is collecting data, and we're using that data to optimize our ROI with the improvements. And optimization leads us to a good case for funding. If you deliver an ROI and a promise of even more ROI, you can get funding. And that's what we need to do. That last step is so critical these days, ROI, translated into funding. Go to the next slide. This is a chain of value that's here. Just keep that chain of value in mind. As you put out your virtual learning, we want that great reaction. We got to have learning. Don't stop there. You got to have application and you got to have impact. But impact, when we get there, you got to sort it out. That's isolating the effects of the program. And then try to push some up to ROI. Not many. We're going to talk about how many what kind of programs we should evaluate at this level later. But let's think about ROI as we can get to this process. And that's so critical. Now let's take some steps now. Let's take part of this process. We go to the next slide and say, here's what we want to do. We want to spend the rest of the time on this. A little bit more detail about starting with why. And a little bit more detail about, is it feasible with the right solution? A little more with success with objectives. And then designing for application and impact. That's our challenge. Let's go evaluate some virtual learning programs now and see if they're delivering. Sample some of your processes now. And then we're going to make it better if it's not working. But we also realize at the end here, blended solutions seems to be better. Blended learning. We'll talk about that at the end. So let's go to our next slide now. And I think that's going to start with why. Now, here is our beginning point. It's the very beginning of what we want to do is always think, why are we doing this? But the why has to be a business measure. You see, we usually have two things going on. It's either a problem that we want to solve, or it's an opportunity we want to pursue. So we use some discussion questions. You'll see that in the material that we're going to send you. Some discussion questions to try to connect this to the business and make sure that this is the business problem that we need to solve or the business opportunity we need to explore. You see, we see this so much. Someone might say, hey, we need team building. And so let's implement a program. We have to say, why do we need team building? And it's not because we want people to work together in teams, but it's usually because we're not getting productivity. We're not getting the quality. So we need some questions that we need to ask. So you can see an alignment model here. That's so handy to see this alignment. So this model that you'll see in the materials that we'll send you connects needs assessment in the beginning, the initial analysis. That's our needs assessment. to objectives in the middle, to the evaluation at the end. That's the three parts. Now, we just been talking about the evaluation. We're going to show you some objectives here in a few minutes. But see, we need objectives to drive the evaluation that we need at those levels of evaluation that we just talked about. And then, but the objectives come from the needs assessment. So starting with why involves two levels here. The payoff need is saying, is it worth doing? Is it a problem worth solving, or is it an opportunity worth pursuing? In other words, will I get enough benefit out of this to cover the cost? It's a good question to ask whoever wants us to do this. What business measure are we driving, and will we improve this enough maybe to overcome this cost? Do you think we have an opportunity here to cover the cost and maybe then some, add some maybe? So that's a payoff need. So questions can do that. Analysis can do that. Even forecasting. If you see down at the bottom there, forecasting. So sometimes we forecast the ROI. Forecast the ROI before we even get started. Hey, that's a new tool for us, for many of us, and it's probably going to be the new normal for many of us going forward. Forecasting the advance before we do anything. That lets us know for sure, is it a good thing to be doing? Is it worth doing it when we see the forecast? The business need, again, is the measure that we want to drive. That's a business connection. Output, quality, cost, and time are four big categories of data. That's in any organization. A government has that. Output is what we're processing. What are we doing? The output of our work. Quality is the mistakes that we make. Time is the time to do it. And the cost is the cost of doing it. We have those measures broken down in all kinds of categories. They're there. We're just going to connect our learning to those. And when we do that, then we ask the question, how can we change it? How can we improve it? Do we have the right solution? Patti, why don't you cover that?
You bet. So again, as Jack pointed out, everything begins with the why. The reason for our virtual learning or any learning is to drive output, quality, cost, time, customer satisfaction, job satisfaction, work habits, innovation. Sadly, we tend to start with the learning solution up front and then have to sort out why we're doing it. But by driving the design of our virtual learning from the business need first, then we can ensure that we have the right solution in place. So getting to the why is just what good business partners do. They get clear on what is going on in the organization and what measures need to improve. Then from a design standpoint, as all you know from design thinking principles, there needs to be this mindset for curiosity. When we know what the opportunity for the organization is, when we know what those business measures are that need to improve, then we start having some fun and we get really curious about what is going on in the organization that needs to change. Oftentimes we focus just on the learner. What does the learner need to do differently? But it's more than just the learner. It's the learner as well as the system supporting the learner. So we need that mindset for curiosity. We need to be willing to go down and ask the right questions and really find out what is happening or not happening, that if we changed it, could lead us to improvement in the business measures so that we can take advantage of the payoff opportunity. And it's through this process that we identify the solutions that make the most sense given the why. So we begin with the why, the opportunity for the organization to make money, save money, avoid cost, or do some greater good while it makes money, saves money, and avoids cost. We identify the specific business measures that need to improve. We get insanely curious about what's going on, and we identify what needs to change and what opportunities there are for change. And then the solutions start to pop up, and then we say, given what needs to change, what do people need to know so they can do what we want them to do to drive the business measures? And then how best can we roll it out so that people learn what they need to know to do what we want them to do, to improve the business measures, to take advantage of the payoff opportunity, and then we sort out who needs to be involved. So the left side of the V is answering ultimately, why are we doing what we're doing? And what often happens is when we go to evaluate a virtual learning program or any other type of program, we do so after the fact, and we have to back into the why. That's what often makes the evaluation so difficult. And your program is not nearly as powerful as it could be if you had gone through the process of aligning your program to the business need. So in terms of techniques and tools that we can use to assess the performance needs, these are just some of the ones that we've used. It's simple interviewing, having conversations, brainstorming activities. So it doesn't have to be scientific. These are just some of the techniques that we've used over the years to assess those performance gaps to help us get to the right solution.
So out of that comes the right solution, and we set objectives now. We expect success. And now we're looking at a framework here that's balancing our needs versus our feasibility of getting it done. So we look at what's possible, what can we achieve, and we set very specific objectives here. So in the middle is where we have our objectives here. The middle part is linking the needs to the evaluation at the different levels. Know that when you evaluate something at the learning level, we do that all the time, you look at the learning objectives. We have them, and you do them quite well, but we need application objectives, and we need impact objectives. Remember, the executives want to see the impact. We connect it to the business need, and so the impact objectives, it describes that. For a leadership program, for example, we'd have a leader to say, now think about a business measure you need to change, a KPI that needs to improve. And now we ask the question, what can you change it with your team using these competencies? That's the alignment that we need. And if the answer is yes, then you set the very precise measure for impact, and that's what we want to do. So the focus of the program now becomes, how do I get to impact? You get there by applying something for the application, and you get the application by learning something. That's from the learning objective. And we're doing it because we reacted properly, the reaction objective. So we need these objectives. And let's look at the levels here for just a minute. If you look at the next slide, just reminding us, we need levels of objectives here for these levels. We need to move beyond the classic learning. We got to have objectives for application and impact. They're often missing virtual learning. Think about a virtual learning program that you're involved in now. Does it have application describing what we want people to do with what they've learned? And do we have impact there, saying, why are we doing this? That's the impact measure. That gives us the direction we need. We need those objectives clearly defined. And we have some rules for this. They're in the materials that you'll get, but the next slide gives you some rules for objectives. I want to point out just a couple. Remember, an objective is our minimum acceptable performance. Fewer objectives is better than many. Keep that in mind. We don't want to get bogged down in too much detail. Work with the most important one. We set the very specifics around the objectives with some very critical experts. The expert who understands the content of our program also understand the job context, where the people are actually working or applying this learning they're getting. Keep them relevant. Get people to stretch beyond the objectives. See, we set objectives, that's our minimum, but get them to stretch. We can change if we need to. Failure is okay. Process improvement is the key. And remember, objectives are tools for progress, not designed for performance review. If a person doesn't do what they supposed to do from this learning, we don't put that in their performance review. That means something broke down in the program. We're evaluating the program, not the person. So keep that in mind. So those are classic processes. I'll look to the last one for a minute. This is the key thing, is to now use those objectives designed for the results that we want. We give it to the ISD people, everyone involved, and we're going to give you more detail about that in a few minutes. But we want to test your knowledge of objectives. So Patti, give them a quiz.
Okay. So I did have a quick question though, Jack, thinking about time. Are we good on time?
Yes. Let's go quickly through this. I think we need this exercise. Kamal, if we're okay with it. We
I'm
okay?
sorry, Kamal, I think you're on, Kamal, I think you're on mute. I mean, yes.
All right. The time is should be from it should be 1 hour, so we need some time for the question and answer. But I don't know how many slides are left to cover.
Yeah.
So why don't we do this, Jack? What if we finish the model so we can have a few minutes for Q&A?
Yes. Let's do it. This is a good exercise. It's in your slides. You'll get a copy of the slides here. You'll have the answers to this. So we'd like for you to go through it yourself and check your answers, but go through the slide before and after. So let's go quickly to a couple of points here. Showing you here who gets the objectives. When we have objectives for our programs that go to level 3 application, level 4 impact, we give it to the designers and developers and the owners of the program. For the facilitators, if they're involved, they may not be, that might be their administrator. The participants get them, we all get them. Everyone has the objectives now. And when we do that, it lets us design for what we need. Quickly, Patty, let's go through the next 2 points. We're making sure that we make it stick. We want to get to level 3, level 4. We're using tools and templates, job aids, and anything we can from a design perspective to make sure they use it and it has impact. So we want to have some exploration and some experimentation here. Also, if you look at this, this brings us into something that we've been doing in this field for a long time, and it's looking at the transfer. If you've looked at this kind of diagram, you see who's involved and the time frame, and that's the manager, the participant, and the facilitator. The research tells us that the box that we need to work in most is the before and after management. Those 2 boxes. And what that tells us, we've got to involve the manager. We tend to leave them out when it's a virtual program because they may be taking this virtual program, the manager doesn't know it. We got to make sure they do know it. Involve them if it's important enough to do so, and it normally is. So now if we got that, we're going to collect some data. This is classic data collection methods. It's probably not new to you to get to level 3, level 4. That's where we want to be. But here's the challenge to you. Let's go to the next slide. Think about a virtual program you have now. Let's go see if they're using what they've learned, and let's see if the impact is there. Even ask them, if you didn't start with the end in mind, you might ask them, what was the impact of this in your work? So you begin to see if there's something there now, but we got to change it because we're going to probably be disappointed here. And you look at the next slide, this is what we're trying to do, and that is to improve the processes. We want, if it's not working so well, we want to improve that. And when we improve that, we can make it better going forward. So we do have application and impact. And let's look at one more slide that's critical here, and that's the blended approach. You're going to see blended in the book that we're going to send you. Remember, it's got 6 ROI studies there. Blended seem to work best. This is a leadership program which starts with e-learning. You can see the first part there is e-learning as the beginning. Then you've got classroom, and then you've got on the job. The on the job is all technology for the most part, or it's all virtual. So you got virtual in the beginning, virtual at the end, and in the middle is some learning live. That seems to work best as we've looked at lots of studies over the years. And let's look at why we're doing this. Quick payoff. Patty, I think you'll take this on through.
Right, so just the payoff of designing virtual learning to drive results and demonstrate the ROI. We've seen people use the process to justify and defend their budgets. It's a good tool to do that, to demonstrate your programs are really driving value that matters. And more importantly, aligning your programs to the business needs. Whether or not you evaluate to impact an ROI for some of your programs, the thought process on the left side of the V is critical. We want to make sure that the solutions that we're putting into place are connected to the business and that we're clear on why we're doing what we're doing. We can show contribution of programs, a contribution that's defined in terms that are important to those people who are funding those programs, which helps us earn the respect of those people funding the programs. And when we demonstrate value that resonate with those funders, the team feels much better about their work. We can use it to improve our programs and projects, improve support for those across the board. And of course, that black box thinking is going to ensure that the programs are better than they were prior to the evaluation. We can identify those programs that need to go. Some people use the process mainly for that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. We look at the ROI methodology as a process improvement tool as much as a tool for accountability. Sometimes, though, we do have programs that need to go, and this type of data help reinforce the need to get rid of them, right? We can also identify programs that could be worthy candidates for other functions in the organization. So using data to help inform those types of decisions, and then in the end, earn the seat at the table that we all want so much. In the end, what we believe to be true is that hope is not a strategy. Just putting a virtual learning program out there and hope it sticks doesn't work. Luck is not a factor in all of this, and then doing nothing is not an option. Virtual learning has been a part of us for many, many years, but today's environment, we know that virtual learning, virtual meetings, virtual conferences are part of our life for the duration. So we can't do anything. We have to design them to drive results. So our motto is, change is inevitable, progress is optional. We have a choice. We can design solutions that work, or we can keep being activity-driven rather than results-driven. So just a couple of things, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And I've seen some of the questions and hopefully have responded to them in the chat box, but I want to make sure that we address those that we didn't. But real quick, Jack mentioned this book. You all will be receiving a copy of this ebook. It has the first half of the book is around the process. The second half of the book is case studies. So you will be receiving that case study book. Also, we want to invite you, if you have not done so already, is register in the ROI Institute Academy. Register for level 0, the free tools. Okay, it's not so much a membership as is a portal of free tools, but go in there and get the tools that you need. You will become part of our mailing list, but as soon as you get your tools, if you decide you do not want to hear from us, opt out and we will comply. But jump in there and get your free tools, and you will see other opportunities we have for building capability in this process. We always appreciate you jumping in there and learning more. We've got our virtual boot camp. It's asynchronous. Dr. Tim Brock, you will meet him asynchronously in the boot camp. Very inexpensive program. It's our one-day workshop in an interesting format, but it's been very successful actually. So we get a lot of good feedback on it. It's a good primer on this process. And then of course, as many of you online know, we have the certification, and we have now taken the certification virtual. We did this in a hurry at the beginning of the year because we had many people who wanted to participate in the live and in-person virtual workshop, live and in-person certification workshop, and we had to change because of COVID. So we pivoted very quickly to create this virtual ROI certification. There are 14 modules that you complete, but what we did to ensure that people got as much of the interaction that they value so much in the in-person as possible, we have included weekly group coaching sessions. So 2 hours a week, we meet as a group, and through this group coaching process, people share their issues, they share their projects, they get feedback on the projects, and we are also bringing into those meetings clients and colleagues who've completed studies and who have done good work in the area of measurement and evaluation to present their story to our participants. And our group coaching sessions are really adding value to the virtual certification. So this is the gold standard of learning if you ever want to build true capability in the process. So with all of that, let's take a quick look at some of the questions. I know we need to go. let's see some of the questions. Here's a question. So Solomon, I have a small company of 10 employees. I do my best to choose good solution and training. I do not have capability to measure the ROI. What would be your advice? So Jack, do you want to take that one? Small company, 10 employees. Did we lose Jack? Jack, I think, is on. Andy, did we lose Jack? So while Jack's working on his.
Okay, now we got
There
it.
he goes. Okay.
So,
All right.
so small company, obviously you're not doing an ROI study on a training program for your team members. But what you can do is to think ROI. When people start through the program, you want to make sure that, do they understand why they're doing this? They need to ask why. You need to ask why. Why is the business need? And clearly, what will you be doing as you take this program? And what will you need, what will you be learning? So when they get back, you can ask the person, so did you learn? Or can you do it? Will you have the impact? Because you're getting more out of it now. Thinking through ROI is a great thing to do. We think ROI a lot in our own purchases. You see, when you buy something, you're always looking at what's the benefits I'm getting, what's it costing me. You're comparing that. That's the ultimate level, that's level 5. You could say to this person who's going to training, you think it's worth it? We spent, you think it's worth it? Get them to think it. And you look at the impact that they have and you think it. You don't have to go through the calculation. The thinking often causes us to get better at this and to drive this kind of process. Otherwise, we're stuck at lower levels. We're stuck down at just learning things and never using them. So we want to make sure that we bring the thinking in a small business environment. Other questions?
Okay, let's see what other questions we have. So that, how do we make it practical? As it requires much operations in large organizations, but are there any tips, for example, like using the technology, using certain technology? Omar, great question if you're still online. And one thing is when you build it into your process, when you build it into the program, that makes it a lot easier as well. So clarifying the business measures that need to improve up front, and then building it all the way through. So building your data collection into the learning process itself, as well as building in the follow-up as part of the program. And then technology is always helpful if it gets you where you want to go. You know, anytime you can use technology to help you collect data and analyze data. I think the important thing to remember when it comes to technology is technology is an enabler. Don't let technology drive your evaluation strategy. Your strategy should use technology when it's feasible. Too many people just fall in the trap of, well, we're going to buy the technology and let the technology drive our evaluation strategy, and that doesn't always get you where you need to be. So, Jack, any thoughts on that one in terms of practicality?
Okay.
We've lost him again.
So
We don't know what's up.
we need to make sure that the team is working together. You share the joy to the whole group. Roles and responsibilities. You have job aids, tools, you develop tools together. You keep a network of the people working together. You can keep your costs and expenditures low. Imagine this. You've got, if you look at all of your programs, you want to evaluate everyone at level 1. You do that now probably. Maybe 90% at level 2. You're probably doing that now. But about 30% at level.
So what he was saying before we lost him, on that all of your programs are going to be evaluated to ROI. Currently, in our most recent benchmarking data, we see that 18% of programs in a given organization are going to ROI, but that's our benchmark of users. We recommend looking at Pareto principle, 20% of the programs you put into place drive 80% of the business measures or movement, those measures. Those 20% are good candidates for impact and about half for ROI. So we think 10 to 20% of programs within an organization are good candidates for ROI. 5 to 10% are good candidates. 10 to 20 are good candidates for impact. Apologies for that. And then 5 to 10% are good candidates for ROI. So you're not using it with every program. And in fact, you will not necessarily evaluate every offering of a program to ROI. We typically look at that sampling Jack mentioned, is taking small groups, and you go in there and you examine what is happening with a group. And if you need additional data, you certainly go collect additional data. But for most of the time, you can work off that sampling to say, okay, how are we doing? That tends to give you enough credible, reliable data to make good decisions about your programs. So Jack, are you back on with us?
Yeah, I am. It's just lost a battery. That's the technology here. I'm sorry. So what you might do is think about this. There's a very methodical way you implement this, and we'll be happy to show you a kind of a best practice implementation, what's involved in that. It's a chapter that describes how people have implemented this. But you can do it, again, for about 3 or 4% of your total learning budget. You can have that kind of profile that we just described. Also, you've got some help here. Don't forget Vigilance Consulting. They know this. They're experts at this. They know how to do this. They can help as well. So let them know.
That's right. You have a lot of resources available to you. And in terms of automating the ROI concept, again, building it in is your best course of action, and that way it becomes seamless. It's all about seamless integration. In terms of automating via technology, we are working with a lot of different platforms to help us automate different steps in the process. So you can speak to Kamal there at Vigilance. You can chat with us about that. But your best course of action is to build it into the program itself, from the needs assessment all the way through to the end. And you will have a better program for doing it, number one, and an easier approach to evaluation, number two. So, okay, with that, I think we've pretty much covered it, Jack.
I just add this. With SurveyMonkey and Excel spreadsheets, you can do an ROI study, so you don't have to buy software.
That's right.
No problem.
All right, I have a suggestion,
right.
Because with us we have Mr. Ali Amini from Ministry of Interior, who won ROI award lately. We discussed briefly about their program before we go live. So can we have him for a few minutes here? Ali, are you still there?
Absolutely.
Ali Busara,
Yes,
are you there?
we'd love to hear from him.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, can you? Yeah.
Let me go for somewhere that has better lighting.
Excellent. Okay, hi Busara. Can you explain about the? Where are you?
I'm the other room. Yeah, here's better.
Okay, if you can just briefly explain the program, you are running, and about the award a little bit.
Yes. So as I said, we started alternative sanction in Bahrain like a couple of years ago, and we needed a proper tool that we can depend on to just measure the impact and how it benefited the country, basically. So we were able to do that by implementing ROI to our program, and it showed us like two aspects. The first aspect was the prisoners who were sentenced to a regular prison were more likely to go back to the crime compared to the criminals who were sentenced to the alternative sanction. That was number one. Number two, definitely the cost was much less by having people go and get an alternative sanction. Basically, alternative sanction is he goes to his house, he sleeps there, he eats there, he gets his medical care on his own. So basically, I mean, from a country standpoint, they don't spend all that money on that person by him being in prison. So when people are in prison, basically, the government takes care of all of that, all those expenses. When he's at an alternative sanction, he comes to do a certain work for a certain time, And you just have a little bit of cost on like the location, the training place, and maybe a little bit of tea and coffee and snacks and things like that. That's pretty much it compared to a facility that is like highly secured with the people being there 24/7 with the electricity, water, infrastructure, and all that.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
That's great.
So that was a very positive ROI, and it shows how the government is saving cost. So the monetary benefits is cost avoidance. You're avoiding the cost of having people in prison. And you compare that to the cost of the program, it generated very positive to show value in a government setting. So we appreciate you doing that. And for that study, we gave an award. So we're very pleased to see that kind of good work there in Bahrain.
We're again we have another program that we're implementing on students. That's for preventing crime. I mean, at a student level, and we're going to implement that hopefully by next year. And I'm trying to like push for the ROI experience to get implemented in all the other directorates in the ministry. So it becomes like a standard that we use just to certify that things are working and things are impacting the community.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's great.
Great. Good news.
Thank you. Thank
All right.
you.
Other
So Kamal,
questions?
thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Patti, for this wonderful webinar. I've attended so many sessions about ROI. I was in the certification program myself, and I'm certified. But every time I learn something new. So thanks so much. And thanks to Nader. He's also helping us a lot here in the region. He's here with us. Yeah. Of course, we need to just remind the participants here that we are having two ROI programs, one starting from 1st of July until 9th. So the first program will be the ROI certificate, measuring ROI certificate. That's for 4 days. And we have also in addition to that, we have the ROI certification program. That will be until the 9th of July. Will be led by Nader. That will be in bilingual, Arabic and English. So hopefully you can see you there. So those people who would like to have the copy of the book and the presentation, they can send email to Melissa at roiinstitute.net. It's there in their email in the chat box there. Or send to me, it's up to you. But her email is there, so you can send an email and you will receive the copy of the ebook and the presentation. Thanks so much again. Thank you very much for this wonderful webinar, and hope to see you again shortly.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we too. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Patti. Thank you, Ali, for being
Thank
there.
you. Thanks a lot. Nice to see you
Thank you
again.
so much.
Likewise.
Thank
Nice to
Take
see
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye.